Hello everyone. Today my lesson is Development and Sustainable Development. This is a National Curriculum Grade 11 book and lesson number 4. By now you studied the first part of this chapter 4, that was all about environment and its related problems. From this part of the lesson we will cover a new concept, that is development and sustainable development. My objectives of delivering this presentation are to give you different definitions about the development, and you will understand at the end of this presentation the countries which are developing and what are the countries which are already developed, and then you will understand the concept of sustainable development. Moving towards my first slide. First, I am going to discuss about the definition of development. If I ask from you what is development, you may have several answers to be given. Someone simply says that it's all about the growth. That's also correct. And also, as you can see in this slide, I have given two definitions given by one is from United Nations Organization and the other one is by Dudley Sears. Anyhow, what is this development? Development can be simply defined as qualitative improvements in the living conditions of man. Qualitative, that is non-countable. Qualitative and quantitative are two different concepts. Quantitative means you can count, but qualitative means it's non-countable. In the sense, here we talked not only one development aspects but also several aspects. It should be social development, it should be economic development, it should be political development. Every aspect should be considered when you are defining the term development. Moving to the next slide, measurement of development. Should we have to measure development? When I am teaching, I should measure the development of my students. Then only I can understand their weaknesses, their position, and the areas to be improved. Just like myself, a country itself should measure its development. Then only they can identify their development disparities. Then only they can identify their position in the world. Then only they can compare their country with the other countries. There are two main types of measurements that a country can be utilized in order to measure their development. Those two are traditional measurements and modern measurements. Under traditional measurements, I have listed 3 measurement types, and also under modern measurements, I have mentioned 3 modern measurement types. I'll tell later on what is the difference between traditional and modern methods. Before that, we'll move towards in each and every methods. Under traditional measurements, there are main 3 categories of measurements. They are gross national product, second one per capita gross national product, third one real national product. If I take the first one as an example, gross national product is calculated by adding the income obtained from domestic products plus the income obtained from foreign aspects. Anyhow, once you look at these measurements, what you have to think is almost all the components used for these measurements are based on quantitative aspects. I move towards modern measurements. I have listed the first one as PQLI, that is Physical Quality of Life Index. There are three main components that are used to prepare this index. They are the literacy, life expectancy at birth, and the infant mortality rate. So this measurement is basically helpful in finding out the social, cultural, educational and health aspects of a country. There is another modern measurement, that is Human Development Index. The components used by EQLI are differed from the components used by HDI. Here they used three basic components as life expectancy at birth, education, per capita income adjusted by the purchasing power. That means how much power a person is having in order to buy something, that is purchasing power. Right. So far we have discussed traditional measurements and modern measurements. What is this difference between these traditional and modern measurements? As you studied by now, you will familiar that in traditional measurements, they considered only the economic aspects. I mentioned that media population, price indexes, all the factors are based on quantitative matters. But in modern measurements, they are not considering about these quantitative aspects, but qualitative aspects. They considered about the economic aspects, social aspects, cultural aspects. Therefore, these modern measurements are very useful in displaying the social status and the social welfare of a country. Traditional measurements are okay, but they are not measuring the social welfare and the social status. By now, I believe you know what is the most appropriate measurement for present countries. It is none other than modern measurements. That's all for development measurements. Next, we have to classify the countries according to the development. According to the development, countries are two types. One is developing countries and the other group is developed countries. And I have listed some example countries for developing and developed countries, and the most important factor is Sri Lanka is also a developing country. Right. Now we will brief the information on each group. First we will discuss about developing countries, features and problems. The main feature of developing countries is all the measurements, PQLI, HDI, each and every measurement, the values of each and every measurement are lower than developed countries. And also they are suffering with so many problems. Scarcity of resources, energy crisis, brain drain, and unfavorable balance of payment are some of them. Especially one of the features of these countries are usage of technology is lower. They are not using that much technology for innovations. And these developing countries are also suffering from vicious cycle of poverty. What is this cycle? If I start from low income level, moving towards to the next part, when we have low income, they are not spending, the country itself not spending on research and development, therefore no inventions, therefore no economic growth, therefore no economic development. This is moving as a cycle until we break from some point. Do we have any solutions for the problems faced as developing countries? Yes, of course. There are some solutions available. One thing is as Sri Lankans, we can encourage local products to come to the market, and also the government should be encouraged to form regional organizations and to get their support, and also the government should get some foreign aids in order to utilize them in the country effectively. Right. Anyhow, even though Sri Lanka is a developing country, we have some significant features. We have high literacy, we have low infant and maternal mortality rates, and also we have higher level of life expectancy. That means in our country, as Sri Lankans, we can be proud because we have high literacy and high health facilities in the country. When it comes to developed countries, do they have problems? Even though their indexes and the values of indexes are very higher, they do have certain problems. Even though they are using more technology, still they are having some problems. Energy crisis, international terrorism, natural disasters, and diseases, just like what we face nowadays, everything comes under the problems of developed countries. By now, you know what is development. But what is this sustainable development or the sustainability? This is all about keeping the resources for future generation while developing yourself. This is sustainable development. Here the main factor is we have to think always about the future generation. I have listed some facts about the evolution of the concept of sustainable development. Here the first initiatives were taken by World Environmental Commission in 1983 and followed by International Conference on Environment and Development in 1992, and also in the year 2000 and 2012 the concept of sustainable development was discussed by almost all the countries in the world. Why sustainable development? Why can't we just discuss about the development aspects? When we talk about sustainable development, it's all about future generation. It's all about protecting the environment. It's all about protecting the social aspects and economic aspects. So when we consider almost all the factors, sustainable development is very important in order to eradicate poverty and hunger, in order to maintain cultural diversity, and to protect human rights, peace, and the security, and to make a world with the people who are living in harmony. Moving towards to the next slide. Adopt environmental friendly lifestyle and economic use of resources, proper disposal of garbage, conservation of environment, power and energy are some steps or the measurements that can be taken in order to achieve the concept of sustainable development. There are many strategies implemented globally in order to increase the productivity, at the same time in order to implement the concept of sustainability. Some of those strategies are mentioned below. Those are 5S concept, TQM, total quality management, PPP, green productivity concept are some of them. I believe that the first one, the 5S concept, is very much familiar to our students because in our school we have already implemented this concept. What you have to think here is the purpose of implementing this 5S concept in the school is to maintain the sustainability and as well as to protect the resources to future generation. That is one objective of implementing this concept in the school. Moving towards my next slide, you can see some pictures of 5S concept, TQM concept, that is total quality management. These concepts are very important in order to manage and maintain the concept of sustainable development. I have included two definitions or the views presented by two personalities, and always what they are highlighting here is whatever the resources we are using, we have to keep them for future generation in order to protect the planet Earth. That's all my presentation, and I have given some questions for you all. You can answer them. At the same time, you can refer the textbook and underline the important points. Thank you.